Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Rugby League Coach Live, episode 4. 4 already. That has flown quite quickly. Rugby League Coach hosts a live event each Wednesday at 7 a.m. Brisbane time. That said, next week, so a week today, we are going to be 7:30 at night, which is 10:30, I believe, in the UK. And that's just quick maths there that I've done the time difference. We go live, or I go live, to help people in community rugby league to be heard, people who work in our junior and our A-grade clubs, our amateur clubs all around the world. Quite often they just get dismissed as social media or keyboard warriors, but anything that you put on my Facebook, as long as it's not rude and incendiary, I will endeavour to read them out. Or indeed, you can come on the live or comment right now and I will try and read them out today. Some of the topics that I won't be going through today, but if you want to pass comment, I will, and I'll respond and we'll talk about them because there's quite a lot to get through today. What has happened to the Storm? So the Storm and the Roosters both crashed out of the NRL finals this weekend, and for many that will have been a shock. And no doubt Melbourne Storm are so used to success. I think it's many years since they've gone out in that round of the playoffs. So what do you think's happened to the Storm? Any community and amateur-based thoughts that you want to bring up, any issues, please bring them forward so we can look at them during this live. And the other thing, one thing that got put across my desk this week, your thoughts on a school teacher using their position as a representative coach to entice primary school-age children to their team, and that's in writing. Before we go into the juicy stuff, there's only 5 days to go until the school holidays here in Queensland, and the Aim Higher Roadshow goes through 5 venues in Brisbane. It goes to Sanford, it goes to Ipswich, it goes to Logan, it goes to Graceville, and it goes to Capalaba, and then it heads to Melbourne, and then Sydney, and then the UK, Saddleworth, Shawcross in Dewsbury, and also Portugal Vine over in or near St Helens. And you can see all the details on at Rugby League Coach on Facebook or at Rugby League Coach at Insta. And you can also always email me, admin@rugbyleaguecoach.com.au. Those things are open right now. I've just had a comment come through, so I'm trying to see if it's something that we can have a look at. Sean Martin said Storm need to pay the full price for their play. I thought those days were over, Sean. I thought the old brown paper bag under the table was gone. I thought they were in the past. So that's a great first comment to start with. One of the big topics that I brought up on social media this week before I get into the juicy one was Coach of the Year. Obviously, many people think it's between Craig Fitzgibbon at Cronulla and Todd Payton at North Queensland, but I also threw in there the Penrith coach, Ivan Cleary. So remember, it's Coach of the Year. So some people commented and talked about the last 2 years and last 3 years, but it's got to be Coach of the Year. So does Ivan Cleary deserve the medal or the award for going close to back-to-back titles? Does Fitzgibbon deserve the award for taking Cronulla from not in the finals to second place in the ladder, although some would argue that their draw was relatively easier? And I suppose a lot of it depends on what happens in the finals this weekend and beyond. Or what about Toddy Payton, who took a team from near wooden spooners, and many tipped them for the wooden spoon, and they are now one game off the grand final. But you talked about it on social media. Most of you went with Payton. Johnny Wraithby has to be Todd Payton. Some tipped them for the spoon. Muriel Serum, only one obvious choice, the sheriff himself, Todd Payton. Shane Duncan, Payton by a country mile, 15th to 3rd. Or was it not? Yeah, it was 3rd, wasn't it? David Pocock, Payton for me. Sean Jeffries, though, says that Cleary, with back-to-back minor premierships, that's Coach of the Year stuff right there. Boyd Healy, Cleary, no doubt. Chap Pato, Cleary walked into a set-up system. Look what he created at the Tigers, in inverted commas. Payton or Fitzgibbon easily should be considered the Coach of the Year for what they have done with their clubs. Payton has totally turned the Cowboys around, and to think he was on the chopping block. Yes, he was. And he was on the chopping block because he went in as a change agent and I suppose upset quite a few people along the way. And change agents do obviously upset some people as they are changing things. Tavita Varve, Cleary, his halfback only played 15 to 25 out of 25 games this year. Also, his 5'8" was out for 5 weeks. Also, this isn't including other injuries they copped and still won minor premiership by a country mile. The others are well-deserved candidates, though. Very balanced view there. My mate Damien O'Donoghue, JD for me, so that's Jason Demetriou. But I'm a bit biased. Going on coaching alone and handling different situations, I'd say he's streets ahead after tonight. He posted that after the semi-final at the weekend. In saying this, I do not expect him to win it because there's argument for 4 or 5 coaches. Again, Damien, the argument for Demetriou will be even more powerful if they go one game from the grand final. And one thing about South, I think they've improved as the year has gone on and dealt with the loss of Reynolds and others quite well as the year has gone on. That is obvious improvement. If you improve as the year goes on, you know that you're coaching. And the quote of the century from Matthew Davis, Coach of the Year nomination, Michael Maguire. Keep your comments coming and I'll endeavour to look at all of them as I've got the phone going here, and hopefully I can get to all your comments. This week we had quite an exciting NRL semi-final period, and it culminated in the Roosters and Rabbitohs game on Sunday. 7 sin bins, and it went well past 6 o'clock, so the game ran and ran and ran. It's brought up a couple of discussion points. Number one, the spectacle. Did it get ruined? But number two, what was the game trying to achieve? Gus Gould made some comments this week on 100% footy that caught my eye. He said, quote, "You get a reaction like we have to HIA and concussion and the way we're treating those, and you get an oversensitive refereeing group," close quote. He later went on to say, "Incidental hits with the head and different things that have happened during the course of the game is a phenomenon in our game because our absolute fear of concussion. Fear of concussion on unfounded medical advice, on concussion. They're waiting on this tsunami of litigation. I've been reading about it for 10 years and it hasn't arrived yet. It's still coming across the Pacific." He also said, how many of the players who got headshots yesterday ended up in the sin bin, or who did headshots in the sin bin? The game is too tough for doctors, too tough for lawyers, too tough for media, and that's where we're getting to now. They don't want to be held responsible if someone gets knocked out, but that's the nature of our game. Close quote, Gus Gould. When I heard that, I've got to be honest, I felt that old Gus was going back into dinosaur territory. I feel that Gus has got to start to read the room a little bit. When I first arrived in Australia a decade and a half ago, and I moved and worked and lived in Sydney, many parents couldn't wait to tell me that so many people in that area were switching their kids to soccer because of the perceived dangers rugby league has. Kids do watch the NRL and they copy their heroes. They think that is what they need to do at the weekends. We also have some coaches that are somewhat unethical and allow things to go. And we also have a little bit of a refereeing crisis. We have a coaching crisis, a refereeing crisis, because there's not enough of both to go around. We are a funny sport in the sense that we're a bit like UFC and boxing, that we have a gladiatorial element. But the problem is we also need to get some participation too. When we increase participation, those boys and girls grow up to become either players, coaches, officials, volunteers. All of them tend to become fans unless they become disillusioned with the game. The difference between a UFC or a boxing or something similar is they don't have as many demands to try and increase participation. And even if they do, you only need to get one boxer or one UFC fighter. You don't need to find 20. And you don't have a 10-month-long season. So we have a double problem in rugby league. We want to grow participation, but we also want people to watch. So if you think about the spectacle, something like Origin, where the head highs are sort of let go in an unwritten rule, that is a good spectacle. Whereas Sunday, 7 sin bins, you could argue that wasn't a good spectacle. So we've got the spectacle and the viewership and the product, but we've also got to think about participation. And I think the NRL have been making attempts to future-proof the game because they know this tsunami of litigation is coming. It will come, Gus. Just because it's not reached Australia yet doesn't mean it isn't happening elsewhere. NFL are already streets ahead down this path, and so are other sports like soccer in the UK and in Europe. We also need to look at what rugby union are doing, because that's the world sport out of the two rugby codes. Tackles are encouraged to be lower as per the rules. A shoulder or head contact high tackle with a high degree of danger is a red, and a low degree of danger is yellow. If it's the arm that hits the head or neck, you're looking at a red or yellow. And then they refer to something as a seatbelt tackle, which you can imagine sort of goes across there. That's at least a penalty. Now, let's look from the participation angle first. Rugby union in Australia, okay, it's probably not travelling too well. And based on 2019 stats, the participation rates aren't quite there compared to league. But let's look at rugby union around the world. It's played by 6.6 million people worldwide in 119 countries. That's 2019 statistics, pre-pandemic. Rugby league at about the same time was approximately 70 to 80 to 100 countries playing rugby league. And the last time I checked, it was approximately 500,000 people around the world, and that's generous. So 6.6 million versus 500,000 people. Now, I know there's other issues that contribute to participation. I know that finances, I know that old empire days, the way the game spread, establishment versus non-establishment, private schools, state schools, all that kind of thing, and all these other factors. But we need to accept that safety is one of them. Parents care about their kids. We know more now about concussion and whatnot. Indeed, I've got a quote here from Peter V'landys just over a year ago on that very subject. I'll get to that in a moment. You may remember the NRL tried to crack down on high tackles all of a sudden in the Magic Round during 2021. To be honest, I think this crackdown needs to happen during a trial period in the pre-season so that coaches and players can get used to it, because if fans are turning off from the game, that doesn't help the bottom line. That doesn't help the viewership figures that we need as well, the exposure. It seemed at the weekend that Ashley Klein was doing his own mini high tackle crackdown on behalf of the NRL. And I guess a semi-final of the NRL isn't the time to do it. There was an article written by Michael Chammas that probably didn't get the distribution that it deserved in the game of rugby league, because people probably don't like to hear it. But the truth is the truth, and I will always endeavour to highlight these things so that we know where we're at, so we can try and sort it out. Michael Chammas wrote an article about a week after the Magic Round high tackle crackdown. And in there, the headline was, "Is Rugby League dying? The never before released numbers that have NRL power brokers concerned." It was written on May the 22nd, 2021, so just over a year ago. NRL administration has previously sugarcoated participation figures by including touch football and league tag numbers alongside registered tackle players. The current NRL regime doesn't want to do that. They want transparency. And the figures that Michael Chammas quoted, in a loss of something like 12,000 male tackle rugby league participants in Australia since 2015, an 8% drop. Obviously, some of that is offset by the female growth, the fastest area of growth in the rugby league world. He also said that the New South Wales Rugby League is doing a better job at stemming the flow, but there are still 4,000 less male participants in New South Wales over the same period since 2015. So that's a 5% decrease in boys and men's registered players in the state. In Parramatta, the second largest district in Sydney, there has been a whopping 26% decline in male tackle participation since 2015. Western suburbs, southwest Sydney, a stronghold, and a booming population growth, an 18% decline in the same period. There is, however, an alarming drop when males hit the teenage years. In 2015, there were 1,750 male players between the ages of 13 and 15 in Penrith, but that figure dropped to 300 in 2018. So that's nearly 2,000 down to 300 in 3 years. And the same trends are evident for 16 to 18-year-old males and the 19 years plus males across the state of New South Wales. But of course, it's a different story when we come to females. Peter V'landys in this article was quoted as saying, talking to parents I've spoken to, they are concerned about their kids getting hurt. So that's why I want to stress to these parents that junior rugby league is safe. So we've got the participation issue. Of course, there are other reasons why those participation figures are starting to drop. We can look at the cost of the game to play. We can look at other things that children and adult males in particular have to do. It's not just a safety issue, but it's obvious that Peter V'landys felt it was so important to mention it in this article, and that's where the NRL is coming from. As for Gus's comment that there's no medical evidence or unfounded medical evidence, an Australian study of 25 retired NRL players showed they had impaired reaction times and concentration compared to the general population, and that included Ian Roberts, who had been knocked unconscious 14 times over his professional career. You may remember the movie Concussion that starred Will Smith and the efforts that the NFL went to after that to future-proof the game, including reductions on the amount of collision training sessions that players take part in before the season because of the growth of CTE. Now, I'm not going to sit here and try and say the full word for CTE. It's one of those words that at 7 o'clock in the morning, after about 5 hours kip, I'm going to muddle up. So we'll just go with CTE. But if you don't know what it is, it's a neurodegenerative disease linked to repeated trauma to the head. And most documented cases have occurred in athletes involved in striking-based sports such as boxing, kickboxing, martial arts and Muay Thai, and contact sports such as American football, Australian rules football, professional wrestling, ice hockey, association football, and then you guessed it, the rugby codes. And for the unfounded medical evidence retort, Monash University, 30th of April 2021, contact sport athletes are returning to play too soon after concussion, the study finds. New research from Monash University into brain changes post-concussion indicate that the brain remains injured and potentially vulnerable after more than 2 weeks. So we've got the dual problem. We're trying to get more people to watch, but we've also got the participation problem too. No sugarcoating, that's what we've got. And the NRL are aware of that, to be fair to them, and are making efforts, including they've appointed principals in New South Wales and Queensland, school principals, to drive the teenage and the junior growth in the school game. So that's fine, that's all well and good. But also we have, the other problem is we want people to watch at a weekend. Now, I would like to see a sustained campaign on TV, social media, basically NRL players saying, listen, kids, we know that when you watch us, you see this and you see that, but we want you to be safe because there is evidence to suggest that what we're doing might not be safe, but we're adults, we're making our own decisions, right? So obviously as an adult, you can make your own decision. As a kid, we need to future-proof it. But we've got that paradox where we've got to try and make the presentation at the weekend look as good as possible, and we love gladiatorial sports. That's why sports such as boxing and UFC sell out around the world. People pay shed loads just to watch them on pay-per-view TV, because as people, we like to see people ripping into each other. But participation is so crucial to our growth as a sport as well. When we play games on a Thursday or Friday, most of our people that are participating are training or playing games as juniors. So we have to take from the same pot. But the more we can increase participation, the more we'll have future people in love with the game. When the high tackle crackdown occurred, basically the game chewed up and spat PVL out. Like I say, probably didn't do it the right way in the middle of a Magic round, and Ashley Klein doing it in the middle of a semi-final probably isn't ideal, because people get confused when they watch, and like you say, people consider turning off. Hopefully something like this gets put in place in pre-season trials where less people are watching and coaches have time to get used to it, because they'll soon adapt the rules. If their players are getting sin bins sent off all the time, they will soon adapt to the rules. Let's go to your comments from previous social media post. Damien Keeley. The game needs to get back into investing in junior programs that instill both technique and discipline. No point sanctioning at a senior level. Some of these players have demonstrated lack of fundamental basic tackle techniques. Others play at such an intensity that their form becomes incorrect and they can't maintain legal tackling discipline. I actually think that's the quote of the week on social media. There are players that have come through the system and gone to NRL level who do have deficiencies in their tackle technique. There's some players I coached and I didn't get them till I was 16, and there were so many gaps in their tackling technique that they exposed themselves to concussions. Now, you'll see so often players in the NRL will put the head in the wrong place when they tackle, or they'll go in with the chest and the head clash, or whatever. So there is that argument, and I do totally agree with Damien there, that more emphasis on the tackle. And again, well done NRL, they put out the tackle safe stuff this year. I shared it on social media and praised them for that. I guess there never will be enough. We need to keep going. Steve Benson, in response to Damien Keeley, says, agree with the speed of the game and the desperation of the less mobile big men covering laterally under fatigue. It is impossible to wipe high tackles out of the game. 99% of these tackles are purely accidental. So we've got that problem that the older players are in old habits, and old habits die hard, don't they? So I guess, what the area of litigation we're going down to now is maybe we need to have parental guidance on the NRL games. Or, like the movies where you need to be over 18 to watch this, or parental guidance is considered important watching this, because that's our difficulty. We want people to watch it, but we don't want them to copy what they see. Edward Torino agrees with Damien Keeley. I totally agree, buddy. I've been saying that for years. The sooner they get rid of the wrestling BS, I assume, Edward, you're talking about something that comes out of a bull's bottom. The wrestling BS out of the game, the sooner these head-high tackles will stop. Well, there is an argument, and I totally agree, that the rules don't encourage players to tackle around the legs or lower, because once you get to the ground, you're told to move. So there's nothing in the rules that make coaches want to tackle lower. So maybe the rules need to be changed, right? Shane Duncan. It's been on fire this week, Shane. Check out what happened to the NFL. This is potentially a game-ending issue if mismanaged, and we all know how rugby league loves a bum fight. Greg Cerrone, unfounded medical advice? What bullshit. His words, not mine. Des Foy, the old professional, comments a lot on our social media. In my opinion, most head-high tackles are either deliberate or at least done in the knowledge of the tackler that their arm angle is likely to hit the ball carrier's head. I'm basing this opinion on my own experience. I played mostly in the centres, and whilst I often had the edge for speed on fellas running in my channel, me too, Des, me too, I seldom had the size or weight, not me too, Des, and so many a tackle I had to make was do or die, particularly on big second rowers. So I, to borrow a phrase, aimed high. I love that. Sometimes I got penalised. Often I got threatened by the fella I'd hit, but most of the time I got away with it, so I kept doing it. Refs didn't punish me with the bin every week, so giving away the odd penalty wasn't a problem for me or my team or my coach. If I'd been getting the bin every week, I would have had to change my technique. From my understanding, brain injury can occur from one-off high-impact collisions, but also through repeated lower-impact collisions that may never cause a player to lose consciousness or fail an HIA, but there may be a cumulative effect. Hitting a tackle shield 40 times a session may be as bad as getting knocked out every now and then. That's true too. And I guess we've still got a lot to go down there. Perry Creamer in a collision at speed or changing angles, sometimes the unfortunate happens. Yes, a lack of fundamental skills development can contribute to this. However, in another code, if I'm making a tackle and my header collides with the ball carrier's head, as a result, I end up worse for wear with HIA and stitches. The defending player is red carded and suspended for not attempting to avoid dangerous contact. Perry also wants to see the stats on defending players' HIA compared to attacking. Great point, mate. And he believes that there's more on the attempt to tackle with head placement. Now, this is a tricky one. There's a lot of views out there. Please comment. If you don't manage to do it in the live, feel free to post after the live, right? And we'll always bring them up in future weeks. Sean Martin's been commenting a lot now. Development of the more skilled game structure will reduce the damage done by dumb one out collision at all levels. That's a good point, Sean. So the more people that are in motion in attack is your point there. Of course, as well, the game and the players are encouraged at the minute to stall the player getting to the ground, so the player's actually in the air for longer. That's why things like the what do you call it when they come in? The cannonball, the crusher, and all them. I mean, we've got a whole new language because of the rules in rugby league, so we do really need to consider that. Okay, the next topic. Any Parramatta fans out there? Do you know it's 36 years since you last won the competition? The last time you won the comp, Bob Hawke was Prime Minister and a schooner was $1.45. Oh, wait, imagine that. $1.45. I think we all agree Mitch Moses is the key this weekend, or a real key, whether he plays, not plays, if he's a full shilling this week or not, again, due to concussion. Let's hope he's okay. John Bull reckons it's obvious what happens when his forwards don't dominate. He believes it's all on him to win the match. He needs to not overplay his hand. There is times at the weekend where I thought he did overplay his hand. He was trying to produce magic. Mark Errington, he's a tough kid and very underrated. Danny L, hello, and I'm sorry if I didn't get that name right, Danny. Gutho and Dylan Brown need to step up even if he does play. So there's a thought out there that they didn't quite get to the mark last week. And Bruno Sierre thinks he's a great talent, just has the wrong coach and mentor. Brad Arthur doesn't know how to lift his team during finals, whereas other teams lift in finals. Interesting point. Finals are a unique setup. I think Brad Arthur has won something. I've got it here. The weekend was his 7th defeat as a coach in 9 finals games. He's contracted for the next 2 years, but there's many critics who think that the second half fade out against Penrith was a problem, and under Arthur's tutelage, the Eels have never made it past week 2 of the finals. I mean, obviously that could change this weekend. That said, he's had success by getting them to the finals 5 times, but there is a feel in the media in particular, in and around the Parramatta setup, that only a grand final will keep his knockers quiet. I think in mitigation for Brad Arthur, he will be mad if they lose this weekend. They were an absolute basket case when he took over. They were up and then down in the wooden spoon, and then there was a period where they had a couple of wooden spoons or near wooden spoons, and there was a lot of stuff going on off the field. And Brad Arthur I associate with stability, and I think he's doing a great job. And I'd extend his contract. I think Parramatta has been a relatively happy club for the last few years under Brad Arthur. And just like anybody, he will learn and he'll develop. And Parramatta, at the end of the day, are now in the mix to win the competitions, and they have been for the last few years. And I think people have short memories. That said, I do understand that the 36-year itch, is clumping away. But let's have a look how Souths got out of that. They built their club. They didn't just pay out coaches all the time, and they built their club steadily, and they hadn't won a comp for 50 odd years. And that often is a reason that clubs panic. I think we all agree that Souths were a bit of a basket case at times off the field. They were even banned from the comp at one point. So Parramatta have obviously had some problems off the field over the years as well. You're only as good as your front office, the old super coach used to say. So I just see that organisation moving in the right direction. I would suggest Parra probably needs to take a steady approach and not panic. Your comments from any of the other issues, I'll just get to now. Matthew Williams, if the ref call held on tackles a lot earlier, and if the player is then put to ground, it's a penalty. This will encourage teams to make the tackle and get them to the ground. Penalise a player entering the tackle after the held. Allow players a little extra time in the held tackle on the ground and standing up. But upon a release call, they must release completely. You've got some great points there, Matthew. We'd rather squeezes happen around the legs on the floor, wouldn't we, basically? Or around other parts of the body rather than the head, the crushers and headlocks and this, that and the other. I guess it all comes down to the rules, and it all comes down to how they're interpreted. I do notice sometimes in the junior game, it happened a lot in the school, sometimes refs would call held even when there was still motion going on, but the motion had been significantly reduced. And I think sometimes the refs panicked because they didn't want a bigger kid to hurt a smaller kid. But maybe that's where we need to get to a little bit. Each week I'll mention something about why I'm worried about the AFL and it's what it's doing to our game. There's a couple of things that I could have brought up here. I mean, one of them is the size of the TV deal, but I'll go into more detail next week. But for evidence that AFL is really kicking our backsides as a sport, have a look at the semi-final crowds. So compare apples and apples. Look at the first week of the AFL compared to the first week of the NRL, the second week, so on and so forth, when the second week starts to unfold this weekend. Again, mitigation. We had Penrith playing at home, so a maximum of 25, I think, and it looked good on TV. Cronulla playing at home, a maximum of 12.5, and again, it looked good on TV. If we'd have played at the big stadium, the Stadium Australia, is it called, the core now, I don't think we'd have filled it. We'd have got a big crowd, but I don't think we'd have filled it. But again, the game probably needs to look at things like putting so many fans in front of the camera so it looks better. But in the AFL, they're getting crowds. I think in the first week of the finals, I might be wrong, but their lowest crowd was 70,000. There was crowds at 90,000. They're kicking our butt, kids. We're in trouble. I'm talking about being in trouble. The Sea Eagles. That's the next topic. It's just rumbling on. What's going to happen with Des? I'd love to see your comments. What do you think should happen with Des? It's rumbling on, isn't it? Where's it going to get? Where's it going to end? 71% of you on an Insta poll said Manly should keep Des. Paul Kent wrote earlier in the week that peace treaties often end in civil wars, and that's where Manly are heading. A peace accord a week ago in a North Sydney office did little to ease tensions at the club, which seemed to be the intention going in, if not coming out. Des Hasler sought to have his contract extended by a year to bring some stability, but it didn't happen, and both sides still left claiming victory. Dean Ritchie wrote earlier this week that Des Hasler is now considering a prospect that would have been unthinkable just 12 months ago, walking away. The Telegraph was told that Hasler will contemplate leaving if he cannot secure stability from the club's owners, and other Manly Football Club employees are considering their immediate futures. And there was a quote attributed to a source that you can't have high-performance environment without stability. Last night on NRL 360, David Riccio said that Des has been asked to find 2 assistants to follow him after he's completed a succession plan. I did have 2 comments on Instagram that are screenshotted that I wanted to read out here, so just bear with me. TJ Tawalatoa, I hope I got that right, TJ, said it's too late for Des Hasler. The season hasn't been his greatest, and it's reported his assistant coaches are set to walk out. Right now, Sea Eagles are already looking at Jason Riles, assistant coach from Sydney Roosters, as a long-term replacement for Hasler. In my opinion, Des Hasler has lost every connection with the team. He's lost the dressing room, and it's going to get worse. Maybe the injuries were too much, but that's never an excuse. Look at the Raiders. And then he goes on to say they should have kept Jeff Tuvey, in his opinion. I don't think Des has lost the dressing room. I think it's quite the opposite, TJ, if I'm honest. I think the players are right behind Des. I think the team might be a bit split, or potentially a bit split, since the jersey and the Ray Hadley brought up the DCE getting his own house during the COVID times. But I don't think that means they're against Des. So I sort of disagree with you there. But TJ continues, Des Hasler has lost his magic with the team. And he says his management team has been the worst lately. His assistant coaches aren't helping. They have 2 halves who are experts on the game, and they could have turned the game around, but Hasler hasn't been appointing them to their jobs. I can only see one outcome from this, and it's Des Hasler not being at the club. It's the only thing I can see. And I think what's happening at Manly is that Des has a lot of control over the club, and the owners want that to change. So there's some infighting. And it all depends on whether Des wants that to happen. Having worked there, I do know that Des is Manly through and through. You don't need to work there to know that. I'd love to see Des eventually have some kind of succession plan that he moves upstairs. Des, you're the coach for us, a reasonable amount of time. But we do need a succession plan. We need to future-proof the club. I can see both sides, to be honest. I just don't think it's going to end well. And I tell you what is happening too. It's pretty clear, particularly in News Corp, and also the Sydney Morning Herald, which journos have the ear of Des and Desi's team, and which journos have the ear of the management. So I think airing the dirty linen in public isn't helping matters either. Can you imagine how many of these clubs go through these things behind closed doors? Matthew Williams, again, thanks so much for your comments, mate, today, and I hope you're enjoying me reading them out and considering them. They should keep Des. There's not exactly clear options to replace him, though I understand their hesitation to sign an extension. Unpopular opinion, Tommy Turbo carried that team last season and it showed. Without Tom, Manly hasn't got much. Des needs to develop the team better, so Tommy's the icing on the cake rather than the carry. You say it's an unpopular opinion. I think it's a common opinion. And last year, Manly were the team that had the so-called easier draw, and they finished 4th. And I don't think finishing 9th this year is that much of a drop in that sense. I think if you know rugby league, you know that the draw is a bit skew with until you get to finals. At finals, you have to start the competition again. So I think finishing 4th last year and 9th this year, I think it was 9th anyway, it's probably par in many ways. A disappointment, but probably par. But I think the disappointing thing is the way they dropped at the end of the season, and it is linked to that Pride jersey fallout. It is linked because the change seemed to happen since then. So a lot of problems at Manly. I hate the way the new CEO is being portrayed by some in the media. I am a bit biased there because I've known Tony Mestroff for a long time from our days back in England, but he's coming to do a job obviously for the owners, and then you've got Desi's side and the high performance side. I know people on all sides, and I guess hopefully they'll get it sorted out, but there is another argument about this. Very Manly Sea Eagles. Just a bit of a shout out before I go to Ipswich State High School, who play the National Schoolboy Finals today. National Schoolboy Final against Patrician Brothers. It's actually, either way, whoever wins it's a fairy tale. Ipswich, as you know, I was at. If you want to know the story, reach out. Basically, the program was relaunched 10 years ago. It did exist as a behaviour management tool. There's a guy called Kurt Rose, who was very instrumental in setting that up. But then I was brought in to rehash it and make it a high performance program and change the times. It changed so much. And then 10 years on, they're in a national final, and there's a story to be told there, and it will be told. And there's some part of the tale on my YouTube channel, Rugby League Coach. So they're one side of the fairy tale. This is the first time they've won the South East Queensland, and then get to the national final. But on the other side of the coin, Patrician Brothers in Fairfield, the old place of Greg Alexander, I think, they've not won the title for 30-odd years, and they're not far from Parramatta. Maybe something is in the air in that area. And I remember coaching down in Sydney, and this team were in the second division, and our B grade used to play them at St Gregory's. Or if our first grade played them, it was an easy win, and now they're in the national final too. So either way, there's a fairy tale. So if you want to watch that, I know there's a few places streaming it. News Corp are streaming it. You need a subscription for that. And I might be wrong, but I did read somewhere that the NRL might be streaming it somewhere too. Hopefully someone uses it and puts it out there for free. I can't finish this without the next comment from Matthew. They're not using koala properly, in my opinion. And he's talking about Manly Sea Eagles again. You've been watching Rugby League Coach Live, episode 4. Remember, next week we're going to try 7:30 at night. I've got some clinics, so it's probably a bit hard to do it in the morning, but it'd be good to see if more of you tune in at night time. We've had some great statistics, particularly at the overall people that have been watching it by the end of the week too on the replay. Thank you so much. Hope you've enjoyed it. Take care.